Yes. Greetings. My name is Genghis Shakhan here with Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. Thank you for joining us for another video. Today's video is going to be for our service members. We are going to be talking about military divorces, and we're going to juxtapose military divorces against civilian divorces. And so we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the two. Let's do our quick roadmap that we generally will do. We'll discuss all the details of a military divorce for the most part, and we'll talk a little bit about what service members can expect as they are going through divorce as a military service member. And then, if they have children, what child custody and that parenting plan may look like, and what it looks like maybe on the civilian side, as opposed to what it looks like going through a military divorce. Okay. Military divorces are very technical. They involve both federal as well as state law. So it's always great to have someone that has that experience and know-how when it comes to facilitating those types of divorces. Okay. All right. So my name is Genghis Khan from Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. We're a boutique law firm. Myself and Chelsea Wilkerson are the two attorneys. And we handle everything that is divorce, child custody, as well as family law. Okay. As well as criminal defense, I should say. All right, and so let's go ahead and do a deep dive. Military divorces here in the state of Georgia. I should open with saying this is for educational purposes only. This video does not establish a attorney-client relationship, and as always, you should consult with an attorney before going forward with any kind of legal actions. Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about what service members and military spouses need to know before filing a divorce. All right. So, as I mentioned, military divorces aren't just civilian divorces dressed up or camouflage, adding the mystique of camouflage to them. They are very technical and they are different in many ways. They involve both federal law, military benefits, as well as there are retirement issues. They address things like deployment. If we're talking about, for example, there might be children involved. There may be jurisdictional questions because of just depending on what state or what um, base or the area that the divorce might be filed in. So those questions of jurisdiction are usually need to be addressed and resolved. And so the main message is that these things are very different. They are a completely different animal than your typical civilian divorce. So it's important to have counsel that understands that from the outset. Okay. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a little bit how the military divorce, as opposed to the civilian divorce, how they differ, some of the child custody challenges that military service members and their spouses face as opposed to civilians. And then we'll talk about military retirement, the division of assets, division of that retirement, what it looks like for a service member as opposed to a civilian. And then we'll talk a little bit of the same thing about the benefits. We'll talk a little bit about some of the common mistakes that we see made by service members that file for divorce, and then why experience representation matters in these situations where you are talking about a military divorce. Okay, so this video is going to be for active service members as well as reservists. They'll be made for veterans, retired service members, as well as military spouses. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how common military divorces are. There are over 2 million service members and veterans that have, again, served honorably within and with our United States military. And so we're talking about hundreds of thousands of families that sometimes are impacted by family law and find themselves in family court. Okay. And so let's talk a little briefly about what the roadmap would entail. And so I want to go ahead and do that deep dive into how a military divorce differs from a civilian divorce. Civilian divorces are, for the most part, controlled by state law, right? And so you're looking at local jurisdictions, which are pretty usually really straightforward, and there's no military benefits to divide. Whereas military divorce, you are looking at state law as well as federal law control, all right? And there are some retirement issues, there might be some benefits issues, and there might be issues regarding deployment and relocation. There might be issues regarding special protections for service members as well, right? Because the federal law does protect service members, especially active duty service members that are deployed and out on missions. All right. So what we will very briefly talk a little bit about some of those protections. The Service Member Civil Relief Act is one of those kinds of protections, and what it is a federal law that's designed to protect service members who are at a legal disadvantage. All right. And it might be for a myriad of reasons, but DFAS, for the most part, recognizes that service members might be, disadvantaged if they're going through, for example, something like divorce proceedings, right? So it matters, especially if a service member is deployed. So service members that are deployed might request, and they can do it through their leadership, delays in the proceedings. All right, they may seek protections for against default judgments against them. All right, because sometimes because of deployment and because of delays, one party might seek a default judgment against the service member. So this is one of the reasons why these types of protections are actually in place. All right, and so there are some additional safeguards, and these again for our service members. This is one thing the federal government has put in place to protect them against things like, as we just talked about, default judgments. All right. So as a practical point, many military spouses are oftentimes surprised to learn that a divorce may not proceed as quickly as it would if their husband or their wife was a civilian. All right. So one of those challenges is going to be some of the jurisdictional challenges I talked a little bit about briefly. And so sometimes you don't see those types of challenges in a civilian marriage, but you will in a military divorce. For example, just one of the places you can file, if this is a Georgia-based couple, can be the state of Georgia. You can also file in the home at the home of record or at the current duty station, right? Or it can file where the spouse might reside. All right. So there's a lot of options, a lot of possible jurisdictions. And you might say to yourself, well, why does any of that matter? It's very, very important because if you have been following us for some time, you know that Georgia is an equitable division state. When we talk about the division of assets, not everybody operates that way, right? Some folks are community property states, right? Like California, okay? And so it makes a difference sometimes what state the divorce is actually brought in and where it's facilitated. And so certain states have different alimony laws or spousal support, depending on what the state calls it. Different property division laws, or different laws regarding custody and those custody standards. And so it's going to be important where the state is. And so sometimes there is a fight over the form, right? And so you'll see folks form shopping, and that's a topic for another video, form shopping. So choosing the proper jurisdiction is going to be important and it can significantly impact the outcome, right? Choosing the wrong jurisdiction, again, you can cost your client thousands of dollars, right? Just trying to fix what's wrong, all right, in the proceedings or in the filing. All right, so child custody. Let's talk really briefly about child custody and military divorces. And here are some of the common challenges that we see. Military families often face because there are issues of deployment, and so that's not necessarily addressed when you start talking about the parenting plan. So it's something that your counsel needs to address. PCS moves. Not all attorneys understand this stuff, right? Especially if you don't have a military background or you're unfamiliar with how military divorces work or how military personnel are on the move or potentially on the move. Temporary assignments as well as training obligations. All of that stuff has to be factored in and considered when you start talking about that parenting plan. So, questions courts frequently consider is how will the parenting plan work, considering what's going on with the parents. If both parents are service members, we've had those kinds of cases. One parent is a service member that is frequently deployed. We've had those kinds of cases. And so it really just depends on the situation. Who makes decisions while the one parent or both parents are deployed? How will communication work and how will it even occur? And what happens when the service member returns? And so, excuse me, parenting plans in these situations must be very detailed. They're going to have to address things like virtual visitation, deployment schedules, as I discussed, and make up parenting time, and even relocation procedures. Okay, so all of that's going to need to be addressed inside of a parenting plan, inside of a military divorce. Very different than what you would see in a civilian case. Okay, so child support is no different. Same animal. Essentially, what courts have to consider, if you already know, if you followed us for a while, the court is going to take the combined adjusted gross income of both parties and make a determination. The non-custodial parents going to pay their pro rata share of support to the custodial parent. Okay, and so some of the things that the courts are going to consider in a military divorce are going to be your base pay, the BAH, BAS, special duty pay, bonuses, as well as any other types of compensation. Okay. And so sometimes folks, for example, that spouse of the military service member may die if their counsel is not aware that there are some other things that they should be factoring in to factor child support. They may be missing out, right, on some of that potential upward modification of those child support numbers should be inflated. All right. And the same with the counsel for the service member, the number might be able to be deflated. Okay, just really depends on the situation and the circumstances, and it's going to be up for your counsel to essentially, make those points in argument. Okay, so compensation is often very complex, more complex than what you would see in a civilian case. And the civilian cases are already complex, so you can imagine the difficulty level is increased exponentially when it comes to military divorces. All right. Now, military retirement is another animal altogether. And this it confuses a lot of folks. And it's something that, again, you do want to have counsel that is really familiar with this terrain because it can be treacherous, right? And so one of the biggest issues in military divorce is going to be how that retirement, that pension, is divided, and quite frankly, is one of the more valuable assets a lot of times in a divorce. All right. So some common misunderstandings that many people believe is that if you weren't married 10 years, that hey, in the military divorce, then my spouse gets nothing. And that's just not accurate. Okay. And say a court can still divide a military retirement if the marriage lasted less than 10 years. However, they may not, that other spouse just may not get paid through DFAS. That's the way that works. Okay. Direct payments. And so you're familiar with the 10-10 rule. We get questions about that a lot and what it actually means. It's 10 years of marriage, and that 10 years of marriage needs to overlap with 10 years of military service. Okay. And so if that happens, then of course that other spouse might qualify for direct payments from DFAS itself, right? So the common myth is that the 10-10 rule does not determine whether retirement can be divided, and that's just not accurate. It's really talking about whether or not those payments are going to come directly from DFAS to the former spouse, right? So another protection that's out there, Uniform Services Former Spouses Protection Act. And again, these are for former spouses. It is a federal law. And basically, this talks about how state courts can divide military retirement pay in divorce cases. Okay. And so, and that's essentially how it should be awarded is via state courts. Okay. And usually that's coming through the Superior Court. All right. And so here in the state of Georgia. So let's talk really quickly about some of the retirement language and how some of these drafting areas can cost clients thousands of dollars. Military retirement orders, they must be drafted properly. Okay, that's really important. So poor drafting can basically create payment delays, enforcement issues, loss of benefits, and future litigation, which can also basically be thousands of dollars out the door, tens of thousands of dollars out the door, if you know how much sometimes it costs to underwrite the expense of hiring counsel and bringing on good counsel, right? Counsel that really has a great reputation, right? It's not inexpensive. So DFAS has specific requirements for acceptable orders. So it's again essential and important that you get counsel that is familiar with military divorces. Survivor benefit plans. Sometimes we see that this is one of the things that's overlooked. So many people focus on pension. Of course, what happens if the military service member passes away? What happens to that payout, right? That's something that needs to be addressed during the course of that divorce. And so it's really important because that payout, retirement benefits can stop if that's something that's not being addressed. And that former spouse can lose out on some expected income. And so addressing that is going to be really, really important. Addressing military benefits after the divorce, things like health care, commissary privileges, exchange privileges, survivor benefits, retirement related benefits. Some of that stuff is going to terminate after the divorce, and some of it is not. Okay, but it needs to be addressed in the divorce, and the client, of course, needs to be advised on what exactly those benefits that are going to continue, and then, of course, what it might look like going forward into the future. For those folks who have children, the deployment issues and relocation issues, here are some common problems that we see. One parent is stationed elsewhere, right? So we talked about sometimes there are parents, two parents, both parents are military service members. Overseas assignments, right? So one parent might be assigned overseas, frequent moves. The parties might be on the move a lot, and long distance parenting. All of that stuff needs to be addressed. All of that stuff needs to be discussed in that parenting plan, so that there is no confusion about the at least the service member having access, if they're going to be the non-custodial parent, having access to the minor child or children upon their return, right? So courts want to see stability. They want to see basically what is going to be in the best interest of the child. They're going to want to see continuity, and they're going to want to see strong parent-child relationships. All right. Now, here are some common mistakes we just see in military divorce. Mistake number one is going to be just assuming military retirement is automatically divided. Okay. All right. It's not. All right. So it has to be addressed. Mistake two, failing to address deployments in the parenting plan. Mistake number three, waiting too long to hire counsel. Mistake number four, using a civilian divorce template for military retirement issues. Big mistake. Mistake five, failing to protect survivor benefit plans rights, that parties' rights, is also a big mistake that we see in these types of cases. So this is one of the reasons why representation really matters, guys. Military divorces are technical, okay? And so again, you need an expert, or you need someone that is very, very familiar with this ground. Okay. You need someone who understands Georgia law. You need someone that understands federal law, DFAS requirements, parenting plans, how to draft good parenting plans in these situations, division of retirement, division of the equitable estate, and the jurisdictional challenges, custodial challenges. All of that, it needs to be understood by your counsel, and they need to be able to guide you, again, as I said, through this very treacherous terrain. All right. So one drafting error can cost, and it costs thousands of dollars, and it can have very long-term consequences. So military benefits may be worth tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even millions of dollars over the course of a lifetime. So very important that this thing gets done correctly. Very important that you have the right professional that is going to be handling this case for you. Okay. So military service members, you sacrifice so much. Again, it's important that you have someone who understands and appreciates your sacrifices, understands that you need someone to do the heavy lifting for you. You don't want to do this heavy lifting for yourself. You already have a lot on your plate. That's where we come in here at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law. You are welcome to give us a call, 404-999-9529, 478-845-1213. I am a veteran. I understand what the sacrifices that you have given, and I understand that you expect to be treated with basically with professionalism, and expect to be served as you have done a great service to our country. All right, thank you for joining us, guys. If you know a service member that's going through a divorce or they're going through a child custody fight, please forward this video along to them. If you are someone that's going through this process, feel free to contact us. We'll have a consultation with you. If we feel like it's going to be a good fit, we can move forward and help you get some not only justice, but make sure that your rights are protected. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next video, guys.